Good afternoon, everyone. Very pleased to be here today. Thank you very much to ABA for the kind invitation. We're gonna talk to you today and try to present you what IBNS is as a new way to protect ATMs and cash from physical attacks. I'm pleased to introduce the three speakers of the day. I mean, first, my name is Patrice Rullier. I'm the Managing Director of Oberthur Cash Protection. I used to be chairman of ATMIA Europe for all the ATM industry. I was chairman and vice chairman of EURICPA, which is the Association of IBNS manufacturers. So I've been in the business for a long time, actually, to protect cash. And my colleagues and speakers here today are Mr. Paul Nicholls, who is Business Development Director. He's an industry veteran, has been in NCR, GRG, a lot of very important ATM companies. Mr. Eric Hauw, who is Director of Sales and Marketing for Oberthur Cash Protection and has been in the industry also for a long, long time. And Ms. Ling OOI, who is Business Development for all Asia Pacific. So those three speakers will give you, I hope, a very good outlook of what's happening. We're first gonna introduce you to IBNS as an innovative security solution to combat crime. Paul will do this. Then we'll go to central bank regulations, standard and certifications, which is a very important part of this process. Mr. Eric Hauw will do it. And then we'll focus on ATM physical attacks across Asia, and Ling OOI will do it. And then we'll go for question and answers. Please write on the side all of your questions, and we'll do our best to answer them at the end of the presentation. So now, I guess, Paul, the floor is yours to present your part. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrice, for that kind introduction. What I'd like to do is look at, over the next few minutes, is look at three things. Firstly, what is the intelligent banknote neutralization systems? What are they? Secondly, then look at what is the deterrent proposition. Why do they deter attacks? And finally, what evidence is there to show that this deterrent system actually works? Intelligent banknote neutralization systems, or IBNS for short, relies on neutralizing the value of the note, so that instead of being worth $5, the value is actually 50 cents or 5 cents, whatever it is, to the thieves. And we'll come on to that later. Throughout the recent years, there have been different methods to try and neutralize banknotes, including, for example, setting fire to them in the cassette, which didn't actually go down too well with many ATM owners. What has gone down well, and what is now regarded as the international standard for intelligent banknote neutralization systems, is ink and dye, as you see on the notes in front of you. Technology is used not just in ATM protection, but it's also used for cash in transit, retail, and, for example, die packs in cashier drawers. The benefits of this is that whilst it neutralizes the value, it does enable central banks to accept these notes and give money back to the banks that present the dyed notes. The notes are clearly marked as stolen. My colleague Eric will be talking about its standards and certification, but I would say that unlike safes where there is an international standard, here there isn't. And any system that you consider implementing, I really think should follow and adhere to the French standard, which Eric will talk about. The big question, which is next, is does this ink wash off? Everybody asks that, and understandably. And the answer is, as you can see from this test, that it's not the case. The ink does not wash off. You can put it in various chemicals, and all that happens is you destroy the note itself. And for polymer notes, for those from Australia, New Zealand, Malaysia who are listening, it also works on polymer notes effectively. So If you want to have reports and further information on this, we can provide it, including a report from Leeds University, a Centre of Excellence. So what is meant by IBNS and how do we deliver it? Well, we've covered the what is meant by IBNS. Now let's look at the delivery. So if we move to the next slide, here we see two solutions for ATMs, the passive and the intelligent active. I think passive cannot be seen as intelligent. All it is ink within a cassette held in a sachet or a pouch or even a little plastic bottle that relies on the explosion and the kinetic energy generated to burst the bottle to spread the ink. Whereas what we're looking is on the left, which is intelligent. It's in the roof of the cassette on our system, so it doesn't reduce the number of notes that can be stored in the cassette. It works in any orientation, so therefore is suitable for ram raids, explosive attacks, pull-outs, grinding, etc. The only benefit of the passive solution, I think, is it's cheap, but it only protects against explosives. Now, let's look at what comes next. Thank you, Ling. What is the proposition? Well, why does IBNS deter attacks? The clear message that thieves get, and one thing that happens with robbers is they're very good at sharing information amongst themselves. Something I think banks possibly are not that good at is sharing security information, whereas criminals certainly share theirs. And the message gets out that IBNS, if ATMs are protected by IBNS, it is not worth the risk, because the reward, as the value of the notes is far, far less when inked, is just not worth the risk of the attack. So let's have a look. It's an effective deterrent, as we've said, explosive, ram raids, pull-outs, etc. We've talked about it reduces the value of the note. The other thing it can do is secure convictions, because we're able, and Eric will discuss this again, is put a taggant, which is like a DNA, into the ink. So this means that the police can, if they catch a criminal with inked notes, actually take it back to the very cassette that note came from, so they can link them to the attack. The other thing we do is put infrared sensor into the infrared into the ink, so that sensors in note recognition equipment, such as bank deposits, train ticket machines, and in those countries where it's possible, gambling machines, will reject the note as not being valid. So therefore, that again reduces the value. What it means is if you publicize the fact that your ATMs are protected by IBNS, criminals will move on to a softer, unprotected ATM. The other important factor of the solution, as you saw, is it's cassette-based, means that all you do is upgrade the cassette. So this means that you can install it in both new ATMs coming on, but also onto your existing ATMs. And what we're saying is you don't put it into every ATM. What you do is select those which you feel are of the highest risk and need the most protection. And as I've said earlier, putting this system in, certainly on ours, doesn't reduce the note capacity of the cassette. And possibly equally important, there are so minimal changes to the CIT operation that, again, it's easy to install and operate. The big question, therefore, having seen how it works and the deterrent proposition, is what is the evidence to show that it actually works in real life? So if we look at this slide coming up, we have Europol. Europol are the pan-European police force, and in 2019, because of the high number of ATM attacks in certain countries, they looked at what was going to be the best deterrent. And they came up with two things. One is only put enough cash in for the day, which is obviously, unless you're a mom and pop store with your ATM in the corner, is impossible to do for a bank or for anybody with off-premise ATMs. If you don't do that, their recommendation is you spoil the loot and you use IBNS. Now, as they say, the reward is not worth the risk. So what information did they get to make them come to this conclusion? If we look at the next slide, which talks about France. What happens in France is in 2013, it was introduced by law that ATMs in certain areas of the country, which were seen as high risk, should be protected by IBNS. The installation started. And as you see, as the installation numbers have grown over the last 6-7 years, the number of attacks have consistently fallen. Now, if you look at this, we can show you similar examples, for example, in Sweden, Mexico, Italy, and quite recently in Malaysia, where I believe last year there were no ATM attacks because they too have all protected with IBNS. You compare these reductions in attacks with, say, somewhere like the US, which doesn't use IBNS in a big way, where their number of attacks, I think this year is seen to be going up by something like 140%. So, as I said earlier, it's not just effective in the ATM, it's effective in CIT, so you can have a complete end-to-end solution. And that is something I'd like to look at now, which is Belgium. In 1996, because of the high number of attacks on CITs, they started to introduce IBNS into their own systems and their own vehicles. The number of attacks fell so much that in 2007, it was made mandatory. And this is not just ATMs or just CIT, it is actually an end-to-end solution. So I think this again shows to you that IBNS does become a most effective deterrent for protecting your ATMs against criminal attack. Hopefully I've given you a good overview and shown that IBNS is an effective deterrent. At the end, as you know, there are opportunities for questions and I see they're coming in, so I look forward to answering those. I would now like to hand over to my colleague Eric, who is going to look at the role of the central bank and regulations, etc.
Thank you, Paul, for covering the first chapter of our presentation. I intend to make a focus on the 3 key points that will guarantee a successful implementation and deployment of the IBNS in your various countries. Number 1, the regulatory role of the central bank. Number 2, the communication that should come along. Number 3, the technical standards the IBNS should meet. Regulatory. No, back. Yeah. You may not know that most of central banks are already IBNS. Eating, please, back to the initial slide. Yeah. You may not know that most of central banks are already IBNS ready, in a sense that these stained banknotes can fall into the category of mutilated banknotes and processed as such. However, in some countries, the central bank may have to specifically authorize the banknotes to be neutralized by ink staining technology. It does involve that a complete process must be designed and implemented to replace stained banknotes by new fresh banknotes. This is usually dependent on the ability of the banknote holders to prove they are the legitimate owner and to prove the staining origin. A specific form dedicated to professional cash handlers or to the public must be designed and filled with relevant data and appropriate traceability. This process of compensation can be free of charge, but it's usually charged at cost of printing. And guidelines on dyed stain notes will be published by the central bank. In some countries where crime activity on cash is especially high, the central bank, together with governmental authorities like Ministry of Interior, Ministry of Finance, etc., have decided to mandate the use of IBNS, and not necessarily on all ATM, but according to their risk profile. The ATM that are usually with the highest rating are the offside ATM in isolated areas with accessible escape possibilities such as highway entrance. The risk assessment can be prepared thanks to collection of attacks data and benchmark with other regions, such as Europe, where ATM attacks have been very popular for years now. The second point relates to communication. And Ling, you can move to the next slide, please. It is essential to create awareness. Everybody should know that a stained banknote is most likely a stolen note and should be refused as a form of payment. Different communication channels are available, such as displayed on this slide. Sticker on the ATM beauty door, idle screen on the ATM, internet or TV marketing campaign, large and visible stickers on windows or on vans, leaflet in retail stores, etc. A launching event can also be organized like this, like the one that has been done in Kuala Lumpur in 2015. The third and final point to discuss on today is the technical role for defining the standards and performance criteria. And Ling, please move on to the next slide, please. The last thing we all want to have after all those efforts and do not notice any significant reduction trend in the criminal activities on ATM. IBNS are real crime deterrent if they are efficiently neutralizing the cash quicker than any criminal could eventually access it. This is why it is essential to define a minimum level of performance of the systems before they can be deployed. Ink resistance, and Paul has talked about it, there are standards and accredited labs that can guarantee the ink is not washable. The LNE, the VDS, the Leeds University, etc. Chemicals of any type, combination of chemicals, combination of different conditions, temperature, pressure, etc., must not offer the possibility of removing the ink, even on freshly stained notes, whatever the substrate would be. And these labs can give you this type of confidence and guarantee. You can move to the next slide, please. The staining coverage, oh no, sorry, on this one, I remain on this one. See the example. The industry standard is 20% of the surface of each banknote. Back to the previous slide, please. The US dollar bill that you see on the right-hand side is clearly insufficiently stained and could be recirculated if people do not pay too much attention. The Saudi Riyal shows a large coverage and no doubt is possible. If you're given this banknote, you should know it's probably coming from a robbery. The process has to be fast, and it's absolutely key to neutralize cash before the attack is complete. We are talking here in milliseconds in case of explosion, for example. The system must be fast, and as a reference, the technology we have developed is based on the airbag technology, which is, as you know, extremely fast in case of a car accident. Traceability, and as mentioned by Paul earlier, unique tracers, DNA type, or based on different other technologies, unique codes can be included in the ink. It is therefore possible for forensic labs to link a stained banknote to an ATM cassette. It offers not only the ability to compensate the bank that has been victim of the attack, but also in some cases to establish the link and convict the criminal having some remaining traces on his clothes or hands. Very important criteria also to be considered. The ink must be health and safety compliant. Everyone potentially exposed to a stained note should remain safe. And the last point I'd like to cover, please move on to the next slide, is to prevent stained notes to be recirculated. An infrared marker is added to the ink, making the stained note machine detectable. ATM recyclers, but also smart safes, ticketing or vending machines are equipped with infrared sensors. And those sensors will either reject or capture such banknote without crediting the account. See here the difference between an infrared transparent ink on the left-hand side and an infrared absorbent ink on the right-hand side. The one on the right will be rejected, whereas the one on the left will not be detected and consequently probably accepted. This was the last point of my presentation. I hope this was insightful. I'll be happy to answer your questions at the end of the presentation. Let me now hand over to Ling, who will talk more specifically about your region. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Dear audience, we hope that earlier presentations have provided you an insight of the IBNS definition and central bank regulations. Why is it important to implement IBNS in Asia? It's time to visualize some images on ATM physical attacks that are happening in Asia, and since we have attendees from different countries, therefore we will give you an overview on types of ATM attacks from different parts in the region. First, I would like to start with North Asia, Taiwan. It was a rip-out attack that happened in a retail shop during nighttime in Thailand. The robbers managed to break into the shop. ATM of 300 kilos were then dragged by using a car. The machine was also seen in the river 2 days after the attack. Cassettes and cash were gone. The robbers were caught very quickly. China. An attempt attack in northeast of China. ATM was seen breaking violently by using a sharp tool, smashed the ATM open screen. The police arrived during the attack and tried to catch the robber by using an apple fork. These kind of attacks are categorized under rip-outs and force opening. With our solution, the sensors will detect such attacks for any movement to the ATM. The system will then activate and stain the cash in milliseconds. Carrying a huge ATM is not worth the risk. We will now move to Southeast Asia, countries such as Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea. The type of ATM attacks are happening differently. Malaysia. ATM attacks with solid explosives. The robbers blew up the ATM machine early in the morning and escaped with almost full load of cash that were replenished a day before. A loud explosion was also heard in that area. What we learned that the ATM was installed with ink staining technology. We believe that the robbers ran away with stained cash and they even injured themselves. Explosive substance specimens were then brought to the forensic department. The robbers have learned a big lesson as they did not know those ATMs are with ink staining technology. Moreover, in Malaysia, there is no ink staining sticker at the bank entrance nor ATM welcome screen. Stained notes are considered as stolen notes and not worth the risk. Thailand. We see similar ATM attacks. Happening in Thailand. Explosion on 3 ATMs that happened in southern Thai near the Malaysian border. The robbers managed to escape with cash from one ATM. Well, ink staining technology is not yet available in Thailand, and we know that the stain notes are not forbidden. It is considered as mutilated notes. So for attendees from Thailand, we would like to have your feedback of such system to be installed in the country. Indonesia. A torching attack happened at a retail shop in south of Sumatra. The criminals were caught very quickly. Papua New Guinea. ATM attacks were also seen in this country. 3 ATMs were damaged in north of the capital due to forced opening during festive period between Christmas last year and New Year this year. Moreover, the bank tried their best to top up the ATMs with cash to keep as many as possible operational during this period. The destruction of the ATM was disappointing. We are also interested to know the type of ATM attacks that are happening in the Philippines, if any of you can share with us. South Asia. In this slide, you will also explore ATM attacks that are happening in this region, such as India. It is categorized as torching attacks. A rip-out attack happened last Sunday in southeastern India. A damaged ATM was found in a vacant land after robbers broke the ATM with gas cutter and escaped with cash. So now I'd like to move on to the last slide. In Australia, ram raid attack is happening. Smashed through the doors of a shopping center, stealing one ATM and damaging another in an early morning robbery. The remaining ATM has been extensively damaged, as you can see in the picture. New Zealand. There was an ATM attack that happened during pandemic last year. The criminals tried to blast open a shopping mall ATM using 7 homemade pipe bombs. The attempt failed after only one of the bombs exploded. The ATM was only slightly damaged at the bottom part and debris littering on the ground. As a result, no cash was stolen. So with all the pictures that we have just shared, now you have some ideas on the types of ATM physical attacks that are happening in Asia. In order to avoid all these attacks and have the banknotes exchanged, we would highly recommend the commercial banks to collaborate with the central banks to have IBNS regulations and officialized in the country in order to install such ink staining system as IBNS deterrent. That's all for my presentation for today. And if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to come back to us. And now I'd like to hand over to Patrice. Thank you. Patrice, you're on mute. Okay.
I hope you can hear me now.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry.
You can
we apologize for some sound problems, but we'll be sending you the presentation as well as a bunch of videos and package. There were some very interesting presentation questions during this presentation. First, I noticed that there was 278 of you present, so that's brilliant. That shows how interested this subject is in Asia, and I must say you're right about it, because crime is not going to be is not an exception. It's criminals know that there is a lot of cash in the ATMs, and even if today there is not much crime, in 6 months, 1 year, or a few years ahead, there will be crime, because that's somehow the easiest and safest way for criminals to get cash. So, and because it's not guarded, it's not dangerous to attack an ATM, unfortunately. We had some questions. So from Mr. Gautam, how IBNS will support clean note policy of central bank? Maybe Eric, you can just define what kind of policy is then written from the central bank.
Yeah, those IBNS stained notes will be categorized essentially in mutilated banknotes, or it can be also in the category of how to name this oh, I'm losing my words. Sorry. Billets fraudés.
Counterfeit notes.
Counterfeit notes, yeah. So they are clearly considered to be coming from a robbery or a criminal activity. So it's really different from the banknotes, which are coming back to the central bank for reasons of aging and regular use.
To give you an overview, there are as today about 61 central banks throughout the world which have a policy which allows to stain banknotes and has put in place a way to reimburse banknotes coming from a crime whenever it's brought back by the police or the bank, or for technical problems. The first one was Malaysia, Central Bank of Malaysia in Asia, but it's really spreading. 61 banknotes, since 61 central banks throughout the world. It's very important. It's starting and it's growing. I mean, we get interest from a lot of central banks, whether it's Philippines, Singapore. I mean, Singapore has already this in place. I mean, there is a lot of central banks in the area which are, and obviously Australia is already supporting this. Another question from Mr. Wim Lasena. Is IBNS mandatory to all types of ATMs and cash recycling machines? Maybe Paul, can you answer this this question?
Okay, you can hear me.
Yeah. Yeah, Paul. Well, maybe I can answer this. I mean,
sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Sorry.
Sorry, my apologies for this, a technical glitch. What I was going to say is possibly Eric can add a bit more to France, but no, in countries such as the UK, it is not mandatory to put it onto all ATMs. It's up to the ATM owner to decide what to do. However, in other countries such as France, where it is mandatory, as we said, on ATMs in a particular area, it is the ATM, it's the dispenser that is the mandatory to be protected. So it depends from country to country. Eric, is that the situation as you understand it?
Yes, Paul, you're right. I don't think there is any country where 100% of the ATM must be IBNS equipped. There is, but there is always a risk profile assessment that has been made, and that will decide upon the number or the typology of ATM to be equipped. And it can be, for example, 100% of the offsite ATM. That is in some countries the case, and that includes, of course, the ATM recyclers. So both of them in all categories. Yep.
So hopefully that has answered the question. It's not mandatory, and it varies from country to country, and it isn't ATM dependent, is it? It's the actual giving out the money that's the issue that must be protected. Correct, Eric?
It is correct. Yeah.
Okay, Patrice. I think Patrice is on mute again. No.
Actually, no. I don't see him on mute on his screen, but we just can't hear him.
I think, Eric, would you like to take over until Patrice comes back?
What is the next question?
Okay, let me just show it.
If somebody does ATM.
somebody does ATM skimming activity by using either debit cards or credit cards, are there any protection to those instances by IBNS? No, not really. IBNS is not designed for this. It's typically made for physical attacks on the ATM. In this type of fraud, there are other solutions that will more go into detecting the presence of a criminal activity such as ATM skimming, and that can monitor and trigger alarms or even stop the dispensing capability of the ATM. So these are other type of solutions, but not with ink.
Okay, I agree with what you're saying there. I think there are solutions to stop the use, but this IBNS is not one of them. The next question, comes from, it's in short, this is from Mr. Rishi Ram Dahalkar. Apologies if I've not pronounced your name correctly. In short, how does IBNS help control fraud in ATM physical cash? Well, it helps in a number of ways. First of all, because the lid, if you open the lid when the system is armed to take out money, the system will go off. So therefore that prevents people helping themselves to cash out of the cassette. The other thing it does is that the system that is protected from the ATM to the cash center on an end-to-end solution. Therefore, the opportunity for a criminal CIT operative or a member of the bank staff to open the lid and take out cash is not available to them, because should they do that, the system will activate. So, Eric, have I missed anything, or is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I think it's you covered the point, and I hope this is.
Okay, is Patrice back online?
No, I think we cannot hear him anymore.
Okay, right. Let's go to the next one.
QR and wallet, e-money, transforming cash to cashless economy. Whilst cash use will persist. Is it worth the investment in IBNS solution? Maybe Paul, you can address this one.
Yes, I would. I think there's a lot in the press about digital cash. For example, the number of contactless transactions taking place because of the lockdown, and therefore this is going to see the end of cash. We have China and Cambodia who are looking to create their own government or central bank version of Bitcoin. But I think that it's too early. Cash will be around for many years to come for a number of reasons. First of all, there are those people who do not have bank accounts, and cash is the only way that they can actually undertake a transaction. And even in the UK, there are still many millions that do not have a bank account. If you look at countries like Cambodia, you look to countries like India, you look to Africa, there's a high percentage of the population could not operate and live without cash. So I think cash will be around for that length of time. I think once people get over COVID, they'll go back to using cash for the smaller and other types of transactions which they don't use, which they now use tap and go for. So I think the answer is yes, cash will be around for many, many years to come. You'll see possibly some countries in Europe going more to the cashless side, as we saw in Sweden. But even with Sweden, they decided to pull back and allow cash to be used. So I think the answer to your question is cash will be around a long time. Your average life of an ATM is 10 to 14 years. Therefore, I think it's certainly well worth the investment, as we have said, in those ATMs in high risk areas to protect them with IBNS. So hopefully that has answered that question. The next one we have is, okay, this is an interesting one. It says, if this type of security measure is placed all over the world, how does it increase the number of ATM attacks? And how do we identify this unit in ATM terminals? Are there any protection to cardless transactions in ATMs by IBNS? So a number of little questions. Let's take the first one. What's happening around the world is, yes, ATM attacks are increasing. Just because your country may not have them at the moment doesn't mean that they won't start, because as we said earlier, thieves do share ideas amongst themselves. And if they find a lucrative market for attacking ATMs, they will do so. The attack trends go through a cycle that, first of all, it's ram raids, and as the thieves become more effective and people try to put more security measures in place, they move to explosives, as we've seen in the US. 2 years ago, explosive attacks were hardly seen. Now they're commonplace. So what is happening is where the ATMs are protected, like France, Sweden, Malaysia, etc., you don't see the increase. Where you see it is in those countries and with those ATM deployers that do not deploy IBNS. So hopefully, has that answered that? Have I missed anything, Eric, that you'd like to add?
No, I think you covered the point correctly.
Okay. The next one is for you, isn't it, really? How do you identify the labeling, etc.?
Yeah, so to identify there is an equipment based on ink staining technology inside the ATM is usually displayed with a sticker on the beauty door of the ATM that clearly informs the public that the ATM is ink protected. There is also a possibility to have it on the welcome screen or the idle screen of the ATM, like Maybank are doing it in Malaysia, for example. So these are the different possibilities to inform the ATM client or user, also including the cash in transit companies coming for the ATM replenishment, that the ATM is ink protected. And those systems are designed to be completely transparent in terms of cash ATM replenishment process for the cash in transit companies. So basically they have to check the condition of the system, but they don't have to worry. That doesn't change their daily operations.
No, that's true. Yeah.
The next question is about, are there any protection to cardless transactions in ATMs by IBNS? Directly not, I would say. IBNS are made to protect the cash, not the way the cash is being withdrawn from the ATM or being transferred from one account to the other. What matters is the cash, which is hosted in the ATM. Paul, would you have, or Ling, would you have something to add on this?
From my side,
Yeah.
no, I think you've covered. I think you've covered it. Ling, is there anything you want to add with your local knowledge?
Yeah, in short, is that the IBNS is an implementation to be approved by the central bank, okay? And it has the guidelines as well that the central bank will have to follow. And well, the thing is, the definition of IBNS is very straightforward, and I know that some of you might not have a clear picture. So it's actually a system. It's called the Intelligent Banknote Neutralization System. And this
Okay.
needs to be
Okay. Thank you. Let's move on to the next one, which is, yes, you seem to be very lucky in Sri Lanka if you don't have many physical attacks. That's a very positive sign. In the circumstances, in which circumstances an expansion stage of the bank that is most appropriate to use IBNS considering the effective risk management? I think the answer is simply at any stage, whether you've got your first ATMs going in or you have an established base, you do your risk management. You identify those areas where your ATMs are at most risk, and those are the ones that you protect. So I think the answer is, for circumstances, any reason why you think your ATM is at risk, identify it, evaluate it, and decide that you should put IBNS on that particular ATM. And it doesn't matter whether it's a new, old ATM or you're in an expansion phase or not, you need to protect your ATMs. Eric, Ling, anything you'd like to add?
No, I think you covered the point. Probably what I would add is that this the situation may change also depending on external conditions, like maybe a pandemic or a crisis. So ATM, which were not especially at risk before, can become at risk. And we've seen in other countries pull together the situation raising because of the financial crisis or economic crisis. ATM became at risk, and the banks are now deploying solutions to prevent attacks.
That is a very valid point, because I think, like any risk management, you should do it continually, not just do it once and file the results away. It's an ongoing day-to-day activity. Right, let's go down to the next question. Okay, Eric, would you like to do that one?
How much the related cost to implement IBNS? Is that annual cost? Okay, so that is a good question, an important question. We can say that it's probably ranging from 10 to 20, 25% of the ATM cost itself, depending on the type of IBNS you implement in the ATM, depending also on the number of cassettes that you will protect. And if you do a cassette swap replenishment mode, for example, and you want to equip all cassettes, that increases the cost of it, of course. In some countries where cost is a very sensitive issue, the banks have decided to go for this technology, but limit it to the highest denominations of the ATM. So in case of attacks, most of the cash, of the value of the cash, will be neutralized. And considering this point, they could roll out a large number of IBNS among their ATM inventory. Any annual costs? Yeah, there are a few costs, like replacement of batteries, for example, but it's minimum compared to the cost of the ATM itself, and it's consumables. The system do not require heavy maintenance.
Correct. Yeah, what I was going to say, I think here people tend to look at it and say, the cost compared, as Eric has said quite rightly, to the ATM. But you've got to look at it in the total picture. You lose an ATM, you don't just lose the cost of the ATM and the cash inside. The premises are damaged. The premises may need to be closed for some time. You might have some loss of goodwill with your customers. Your bank staff may be concerned about going into that branch again. So I think when you look at cost, don't just compare it to the ATM, compare it to the actual cost of an attack that will happen should you not use this solution. The other thing I think about Ink and Die is that it's actually a low maintenance solution, because what you find, I think, is that we're in a war. The thieves attack your ATM, so you move from a UL 291 to a level 1. Then you move to a SEN 1, then you move to SEN 3, then you move to SEN 4, then you move to SEN 5. And all they do is put more and more explosives into the safe and blow it. So therefore, coming back to your costs, something like IBNS to begin with will save all that extra money on having extra strong safe security. Right, we then move, next question is, would the security system still be relevant since consumers are gearing towards digital transactions? Very similar to an earlier question, and the answer is, I think cash is going to be around for a long time. And once all the hype dies down about digital, you will see that it is well worth protecting your ATMs going forward. The next question is IBNS solution support all type of ATM model? Yes, the answer is it can, and it does, but I'm sure there will be models of ATM that have not yet had a solution developed for it, but that doesn't mean it can't be developed. So the answer to that question is yes, it is a multi-vendor solution. Ling, is there anything you want to add?
Yes, I know that in some countries in Asia, they're using a white label ATMs. So I would say that if you have any inquiry, please come back to us and we can take a look at the models. But basically, as you said earlier, Paul, that our cassettes are compatible with most of the ATM models.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, we've had a question again about costs, which I think
No,
you've
there is
covered.
one about the Philippines
Okay.
from Noel. It may be illegal to use IBNS in the Philippines because there is a law that prohibits willful defacement, mutilation, burning, or destroying in the Philippine currency. IBNS may be considered willful defacement of currency. Such crime carries a healthy amount of fine and or prison term. Ling, do you want to talk about this point of the Philippines?
Yes, yeah, we certainly understand that there is a law in the Philippines on the act. I can't remember the number exactly, 7563 or whatever. Is that, well, IBNS is different. It is actually used to deter criminal, I would say, and it is not purposely to stain the notes. So in order to install the ink staining solution in the Philippines, we have to go through the central bank to study on this issue, and also they will actually come back and see if it's relevant or not in the future.
I think we can add on top of what you just said, Ling, that this was exactly the case in Saudi Arabia and until 2 years ago. And it's been considered as relevant to implement this technology in the country. And the Central Bank of Saudi Arabia was willing to change their law to implement, to be able to implement and deploy this technology in the country. And the exercise has been complete, and now it's completely authorized, and people can, and CIT companies and now the banks, commercial banks, can implement this IBNS without any restriction from the central bank under a certain condition, but it's fully allowed. Paul, you want to
no, I think you've covered it. The fact I was just going to say that in countries, and I was going to use the example of Saudi, that ink is being deployed, even though they do have similar restrictions to what this person feels about the Philippines. We then have one about how IBNS reacts for cases related to ATM jackpotting if withdrawal cross certain bank limit. That's a new question to me, in the sense that, thinking about it, I don't think that we can use IBNS to prevent excess dispensing, because, as it said, this is geared towards physical attacks rather than logical attack through a black box into the ATM application, and it dispenses that way. So I don't think it can be used. Eric, have you got anything to add to that?
No, there are some other solutions to prevent jackpotting attacks than IBNS, and these solutions are based on detection of illegal access to the ATM, and then stop the dispensing capabilities of the ATM. That's basically what it is.
Okay, the next one I have is, if IBNS is installed, how do we monitor it if it's working 24/7? Again, that's a very interesting question, because I feel now that ATM deployers are looking at managing their estates as effectively as they can. And this obviously is a key element of it, as it's security. For example, we can do this by, in Brazil, we provide an API, and that is able to communicate the status of the system. And what the banks have done is use and take that API, for example, and embedded it into their ATM management system, so they can see the status of the IBNS system, i.e., is it armed? Is it in maintenance mode? Is it disarmed? Has it activated? Etc. The other people can sometimes link it into your alarm system. So if, should it fail or activate, the system will go through the alarm system and register that on to your alarm system. Eric, is there anything you want to add to that?
No. I think the monitoring you described what what we can offer. There is one question from Winnie Canet that we have not covered. Does this IBNS compatible to all ATM brands and models you are produced? Will there be any physical change in the cassette? Could you share with us the components of the IBNS and estimate cost for one ATM? So I think Ling already mentioned that we are covering most of the ATM cassette models. There is usually very limited, if no change in the cassette model. We implement our solution wherever there is available space for it. The various components of the IBNS, we can share that with, but it cannot be done here like this. We have to prepare one slide, for example, that will give you an idea of what the solution basically is made of.
Okay, we've covered the IBNS monitoring. Now, the next question I have here is, does IBNS work through software or any other method? I'm not sure how to answer that. I think how it works is that we have a control module that is linked to the sensors in the ATM and the door lock. And if the system is legally opened, this SCM recognizes that, and it is intelligence because it's got software inside the control module, and that will then disarm the cassettes. However, it recognizes if it's being attacked from sensors, etc., that it is an attack, and therefore it will activate the ink in the cassettes to go off and neutralize the notes. So I think hopefully that's answered the question. Ling, Eric, anything to add to that?
Yeah, if I may add is that, as you just mentioned, that the SCM, which is the security control module that is installed in the ATM and is actually connecting to the wiring harness to the safe door. So basically, there are communication between the control module and the ink cassette staining device, which is the ink staining that is placed on the lid of the cassette. So there is a bi-directional communication between these two devices in order for it to activate whenever there is an illegal opening or attacks.
Right, thank you. Next one, is there a sensitivity setting? At what point will it go off? Yes, that is a very good point, because we're looking at countries where, for example, you may have an earthquake or tremors compared to others such as the UK, where we hardly ever see a tremor. There is the ability to manage and adjust the sensitivity so that the system will be able to recognize between a tremor or an earthquake, a pneumatic drill being used outside, a railway train going past with heavy goods wagons. It will recognize that vibrations and those movements and recognize that as being potentially a normal scenario. But when it comes from an attack such as a ram raid or a drilling, it will recognize that that is out of the ordinary and activate the system. And it depends, obviously, if you've got a light sensor in the ATM, that recognizes the ambient light at the back normal within an ATM. But should somebody force open the door or drill or whatever, and light gets in, that will activate because it's outside the normal. And again, you can adjust the amount of light that you want to be in the safe before the system actually activates. That's basically everything, isn't it, Eric? Is there anything more to add on?
Yeah, no, I think you covered the point. We've got two questions on the chat that have not been addressed. One from Seysamon. How effective and efficient is IBNS solution in protection of ATM from attack? And how many type of attacks this ATM solution will effectively and efficiently protect and alert for banks' actions? Ling, you want to address this point? You had a slide based on that.
Yeah, I'm just thinking to show them the slide again. Okay, let me just go back. Okay, so this is the slide that I showed earlier. So IBNS is effective towards all these physical attacks.
Yeah, and the solutions are usually also evaluated and certified by laboratories that control the performance of the system against any possible way to access illegally to the ATM safe. And that includes all of those, and the most difficult ones to address, of course, are the explosive attacks, gas or solid explosive, because of the speed of the reaction of the system, which is expected. And in the case of the solution that we, as Oberthur Cash Protection, do propose to our clients, we can guarantee that the 100% of the banknotes will be stained with a minimum coverage of 20% in all those types of attacks. Okay, next question from Vic. Does IBNS provide technology or solution to remove the stain and reuse the note in case that the ATM attack was failed, but the ink is already splashed? Can a bank clean the note and reuse? Paul, you take this one?
I will do. No, once the note has ink on it, that ink is not removable. If it was, it would obviously be criminals would be able to do that. So no, those notes should go to the central bank where they will be exchanged for full value. I'm just conscious of time, and I think there's quite a few more questions to come. So hopefully that's answered that question. It says nearly in the future, the company which supports ATMs such as NCR Diebold also will use IBNS solution. The answer, I think, to this question is yes. IBNS is a multi-vendor solution. It works effectively across all makes of ATM, and it is installed already across Diebold, NCR, GRG, etc. I've got the next one is how it works. Is software or hardware that needs to be installed? It is all hardware. The solution, it is completely separate from your ATM. So therefore, there's no possibility of you having to install software to manage this on your ATM. However, as we've said, if you use something like an API, you can manage the system remotely, but it doesn't have to go through your ATM management system. Then what is the average frequency of replacement for IBNS in banks? Is there a shelf life or expiry? Our system, and that's all I can talk about, will last some 8 to 10 years. The ink, in fact, it's designed to last the lifetime of the ATM itself. Eric mentioned earlier, and as dealing, is that there are batteries required, and those are part of the maintenance program, and those are replaced on a 2 or 4 year cycle, depending on the battery. Have I missed any more, Eric? Can you see any more questions?
No, I've seen that all questions have been covered.
Yeah, I think we're almost time.
Right, hang on. Can you please repeat the answer about the attack from jackpotting? Okay, the answer is this is a system IBNS protects against physical attacks, not against logical attacks such as jackpotting. So it doesn't prevent those attacks. There are other methods that you use. Yeah.
And we can come back with some details on what are the solutions that we propose for jackpotting prevention.
Sure.
But the theme today was more on IBNS, so I think
agreed.
There will be a need for an additional session.
Yeah, that is, as you said. Now, there was one question here. If IBNS is installed in an off-site ATM just for existence in malls and someone's attacked it, should the alarm also be linked to a nearest police station? The answer is yes, if that's the service that is offered. The alarming is down to the particular ATM or bank deployer, and they decide how they want those alarms to work. All our system will do is notify the alarm system that it is activated. But I would guess if the ATM has been ram-raided or attacked in any other way, your existing alarms will notice that and fire messages to the police stations and to your help desks. Can you see any other questions that need to be answered that we haven't? Okay.
No, checking. of illegal access.
Okay. So on that basis and looking at the time, it's surprisingly how quickly it's flown. It's been very nice to see so many questions coming in and so many focused on the solution, which is good. As we have said, we're more than happy to talk to anybody about their own particular circumstances and how our solutions can be applied. And we look forward to further discussions. And we would finally like to thank ABA for giving us this opportunity. Eric, Ealing, is anything you want to add before we look to close?
From my side, I'm really glad to have this webinar live and with the many important participants today. And so if you have any questions, please come back to us and we can actually set up a conference call and we can actually show you how the system works in more details.
Eric?
I wanted to add my thanks to the large audience we had today and to the ABA for organizing this session. I hope this was insightful, and we are more than happy to answer to additional questions that may come later via email or various chat that we can put together. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
So
I'd like to thank all my colleagues. Sorry, Ealing?
Yeah, so before we end, the last slide is that we have a survey for the participants to participate. ABA will be sending out the link on the ATM Marketplace survey, and please feel free to participate in the Global ATM Attacks survey. And as a result, you can actually stand a chance to win $100 Amazon gift card.
Thank you, Ealing, for that slide. Can I please reinforce what Ealing has said? This is the first global survey of its type, and it is dependent upon people feeding in the information. And everyone who actually contributes will receive in return a report on the findings of this survey, which may help them guide and direct their security. And there'll also be a webinar on the 20th of April, organized by ATM Marketplace, to announce the findings and results. So thank you very much indeed, and back to ABA.